When was the last time you took a leap of faith, trusting that everything is going to work out? Do you crave growth, or are you merely content with the status quo? If you want more out of your life, out of your career, and out of your relationships, you are in the right place. Take the leap and discover how to create a life by design rather than living it by default. Real success starts with you. Now here's your host, Colleen Biggs.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Take the Leap with Colleen Biggs. I am so excited to talk to Miss Marelda Rodrigues today. But before we do, I do want to thank our sponsor today, which is No Problem Parenting. Are you frustrated with your kids? Do you constantly worry about them? Or maybe you're just sick and tired of dealing with misbehaviors in your home. I'm a mom. I know I did. Well, have no fear. No Problem Parenting is here to help you turn any emotional or behavioral problem into a no problem while strengthening your relationship with your kids at the same time. You don't have to be the bad guy to get your kids to behave. Join the No Problem Parenting community where you will find down-to-earth, practical, fun, no-nonsense, and even bass-backwards tips and ideas for how to deal with and overcome any parenting challenge. Go to noproblimparenting.com and get started now. Become the confident leader your kids crave you to be. So thank you, Jackie Finneman, so much for that. She is absolutely amazing and works with kids of all ages, even through 20. So if you're a mom of a child, I highly suggest you go to noproblimparenting.com. If anything, just listen to her podcast. They're wonderful. So our guest that we have here today, Marelda Rodrigues, is here to talk a little bit about grief and how do we move past grief? When I had met Marelda, I hadn't known anybody in that space. And grief is something very different for each one of us. I want to start with that. So if you're like, oh, I don't have any grief, don't get off the podcast yet because you think you don't have any grief, but something has happened along the way that could be causing some issues with you in your body, physical or whatever it may be. And that could be that energy of grief that you're holding on to. So Marelda Rodrigues is a grief massage therapist, functional medicine certified health coach, a massage therapy educator, a culinary wellness educator, an author, a speaker, and global wanderer with over 20 years of experience in the health and wellness space. Through grief massage therapy, Marelda helps her clients feel comforted when they are most vulnerable, allowing them the space to navigate emotional unknowns of grief and loss and gain control one step at a time. Marelda's wellness coaching programs help clients with mindset, food, and lifestyle habits vital to staying healthy, adapting to losses, and building emotional resilience. Her clients emerge from their transformation feeling revitalized, confident, and powerful. Marelda, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Colleen. So glad to be here.
Now, I know that you've taken some leaps in your life that resulted in successes, and one in particular, which was really becoming a massage therapist. So talk to us about that journey and why grief massage or why massage therapy? What was it about that gravitated you toward working with individuals in that type of way?
Sure. I will start with the fact that I think the human body is so fascinating that I've been reading books about the human body since I was 8 years old. And by the time I was 10, I was reading these little home diagnosis books and asking my mom if I had this disease and that disease. And she would always tell me to go back and read some children's books, which are more suitable. But I've always been interested in the human body. However, as I was choosing my majors in college and things like that, I just didn't have the confidence to go into the medical field. I didn't want to deal with blood. I didn't want to deal with needles. I didn't want to do any of that. So I went the route of this nice corporate career in human resources, which served me really well. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, I think that was not my soul's profession. That was my dad's profession and everybody else's profession for me. And I was very successful in the corporate HR space. And there was a problem in our company, and it was kind of holding me back on my goals. And so during that time, I knew I would have to wait out the time. And I just asked my soul what I needed to do. And the next thing I knew, I was driving into the parking lot of a massage school and looking at enrollment and getting all excited, just like I did when I was 8 years old, looking at these human body books. And from there, it just got to the point where I thought, oh my God, how am I going to tell my dad that I'm going to enroll in this school? And thankfully, my dad didn't really say much. I think he just thought, oh, I'm bored and I just want to find something. And he was like, yeah, sure. And then it grew into something big. But the reason, that ultimately I burned out in corporate America and decided to get off that bandwagon and into massage, that was the second leap. The first leap was actually going to massage school. And the second leap was leaving corporate to go into into massage therapy, because I so believed in what I was doing. And there was no needles and there was no blood. And that really cemented it for me.
Yeah, I think those of us that have utilized massage therapy for healing understand that. But I believe there's a vast majority of people out there still, Marelda, that are very confused by that. And they use massage therapy for relaxation purposes and sore muscles, right? But we all know, well, maybe we don't. I know that we have energy, right? We're energy beings. And so we can harbor feelings, negative energy in our bodies, which well up as physical manifestations. So do you want to define for our listeners really what grief is? Because I do believe that people misunderstand grief. They think grief as the loss of someone, and you're grieving the loss of someone, or the loss of a dog, or the loss of a friend or a significant other. And that's how society and culture has identified grief. But how would you identify grief, Marelda, so that the listeners can understand what it is and bring awareness to it, so they can identify if they have any of that going on in their lives or in their body to move past?
So I have 2 responses to your question. One is I want to define grief. And then I really want to talk a little bit about how massage actually heals people, because there's a huge misunderstanding around that as well. So the first part around grief, when I define grief, I talk about a loss of attachment. When you love something, humans build attachments to everything, including their teacup set. All right. So as creatures, we build attachments to blankies and binkies and all this other stuff. So we know grief as babies, because you take that binky away from a baby, and if they don't scream, you're really lucky. So that is actually our first experience of loss, removal of something we love or we're attached to. So the definition just really expands on that. So it's a loss of attachment to a human, pet, possession, lifestyle, or identity. And that's making it very succinct.
Yeah.
So when you lose that attachment, your reaction or your response to that loss are the feelings of that ache in your chest, or that churning in your stomach, or like the tightening of your jaw or your neck. And these are physical responses to that loss. Bless you. And when people experience that loss, the first thing that happens, depending on their attachment. So if this is someone you love dearly, or this was the house, your dream house, and you lost it in the forest fires, this was something, depending on the depth of your attachment, that is the depth of your response. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, now life doesn't stop just because you're responding. So people feel, oh my God, I got to get my kids from school. Okay, I've got to go do this. I've got to go do that. So they don't have the space and don't know how to create that space to give themselves that morning time. And so then it gets bottled up, then it gets pushed down, then it gets, somewhere into the oblivion where you don't have to deal with it because you need the space. You don't want to suddenly be sobbing and then say, okay, I've got to go to a Zoom meeting. So people tend to be in avoidant behaviors because of what they have to do. Yeah. So that, I think, is where people really need to look at, where have the losses been? Have they processed that? Have they given themselves the space to process that? Now, I did want to talk very briefly about massage. And I think people's general understanding of massage is, I go to a spa or a massage location, whether it's a company or an individual therapist, and I go get a massage and I feel better and it helps me with my stress. But what a lot of people don't understand is massage actually matches whatever goal you are trying to achieve. So if you're a marathon runner, we have a whole program that matches the body in motion, recovery, if the day of the event, the recovery from the event, and how to keep yourself together through the next downtime until your next race. So if you're in pregnancy, how do you, through each trimester, as this baby's growing and getting so heavy and bearing down on your pelvic area, how do you create that relief? Mm-hmm. Okay, or the stretching ligaments, how do you create that reprieve from that pulling down? So every bit of massage has what is going on and what is it you want to achieve. So very similarly, grief is also a manifestation of a human emotion, and it shows up in the body with very definite signs and symptoms, very much like a pregnancy, right? It's just that it's not as obvious as a pregnancy, but it has definite signs to it. And when you go in for a massage and it's addressed, it allows the person to feel the benefits and not feel so held down or crushed by that grief.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to the beginning, what you talked about with the loss of an identity or the loss of something that you were attached to. I don't think anyone defines grief that way, the way you define it, that I know of, unless they've been trained. So I hope the listeners are listening. Have you grieved over the loss of an identity? I'll use myself for an example. And I did go through this and I did grieve, and there was tears, there was fear, there was exhaustion in my body. And it was the identity of grieving my identity of corporate America and who I was in corporate America to who I had become as an entrepreneur. And because I had taken that leap so drastically, I hadn't grieved that moment. I remember grieving when one of my favorite CEOs retired, and having to go through that process. But I think we don't realize how much we harbor those energies and feelings in our bodies. And from what I've been told, Marelda, pain that we have in our body, and I'm not talking about muscle fatigue because you just ran a marathon. I've been there too. I've been there. I know that pain, and that is not me harboring any grief or energy. That is just my muscles are on fire and they hurt because they've been running for a straight 4 hours, But I'm talking about women or men that are feeling a ton of pain in their back, but they've never been in a car accident or injured their back, right? They've got a lot of harbored pain in their shoulders, or I hear a lot of women that get headaches a lot, right? Migraines a lot. And I'm here to share real quickly. I had multiple migraines, went for CAT scans years and years and years ago. I was in a relationship that wasn't healthy at the time. And I didn't realize it was the relationship because you don't really ever connect those dots, right? And they're like, we have no idea what's wrong with you, why you're having these multiple migraines. And when I dissolved the relationship, the migraines went away. My issue with motion went away. I couldn't get on a cruise ship or a boat without wearing something or taking pills. Couldn't get on, I had to drive all the time. I would always get motion sickness in a car. The minute that relationship was over and I changed my view of my life, those all went away. What does that tell us, Marelda? What does that tell us?
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about how we approach changes from the Western world and the Eastern world. Because my heritage is Indian. I grew up, in two countries. I grew up with a lot of Eastern philosophy. I grew up with a lot of Western philosophy. But when I came to America, which is almost completely, obviously, Western philosophy with the few people that are tuned into maybe acupuncture or shiatsu or something like that, I find myself going back to my roots and looking at other things. And part of my licensure along the way involved being trained in traditional Chinese medicine. Now, how I use that is I don't personally do acupuncture, but I feel like it is such an important skill that I gained along the way. Because when someone comes to me with a complaint and I feel their tissue and I don't really feel something's wrong with it, now, today, standing in 2022, I know to check their emotions. But what I used to do is I would immediately switch off my Western brain, go into my Eastern brain and start saying things like, show me your tongue, let me look at your eyes, let me feel your pulses, so these were diagnostics from the Eastern way. And then I would write them a little piece of paper that said, go to an acupuncturist and give them this note. And on the note, I would talk about where the energy was stuck, where there was a need for, or maybe the person was deficient in a certain kind of energy. And so I would write these notes and give it to the person and say, can you please give it to your acupuncturist? Or here's who I recommend as an acupuncturist. So when you say that, people don't really know how to listen to their body a lot in the Western world. In the Eastern world, we're very tuned into, the weather's like this, it's going to be this, or don't eat this fruit, it's going to be like that. And I can hear my grandmas in my ears all the time. So I try to bring that into when I'm coaching people, but I always keep my East and West brains. Perspectives on, because I never know where I'm going to go with a client. So helping people really listen to their bodies and teaching them how to just ask the question. So sometimes it seems esoteric and way out there, but I do give them little steps that they can kind of bring it a little close and relatable.
No, I totally understand that. And so I want to get into the minds of our listeners for a minute. And listeners, please feel free to email me at info@callingbigs.net if you have a question about this episode of how to move past grief. Because now that we've defined grief for all of you, many of you are thinking, there's been times in my life, and it could have happened when you were a baby. It could have happened when you were 2 or 3, and maybe you don't remember something that was taken away from you or a separation at that time that you've never really worked through, and it manifests in our energy in our body. And so how do you help your clients? Talk to me, Marelda, about a client testimonial or someone that you had worked with and help them move that grief through and the benefits of that.
It's interesting that you brought up the young age that this can happen. And I can absolutely speak to one of my clients who, an 80-year-old man who came in on a referral from one of my colleagues, and she really didn't know how to direct him other than to say, oh, well, since you're grieving, here's who can help you. Now, what he told her was that he was having all these issues in his body. And since she was his massage therapist, she was also tuned into his body. But he was really speaking of physical problems in his gut, right? So he had IBS, he had inflammation all over, he had all these things. And as an 80-year-old, he was retired. So it's not like he had corporate stress per se, right, but he wasn't able to really get a footing or handle on that. And so when she sent him to me, he told me about how he had all these losses, and that's what we call multiple losses. And he, at age 2, lost his father. In his teenage years, lost his brother, and his mother never recovered from those losses. So he felt responsible for her. So he abandoned his childhood to take care of his mom. And he always felt she should never have suffered. So he carried that burden for her all his life. Well, when he came in and we did his grief massage, the first thing he said when he got off the table is, I no longer feel survivor's guilt. And this man had been carrying his grief, even though he didn't know it, from age 2. So 78 years worth of grief and the burden that he carried. So he really, now, it's not a one and done. He didn't come back. He didn't really feel that he could afford his therapist and then coming to me and things. But he spoke very highly of that session because that was the first time he felt unburdened on any level.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, you do one-to-ones working with people in person, and you're out of Chicago. What area of Illinois would you say you're out of, Marelda?
I'm actually in the city of Chicago towards the north side.
Got it.
And specifically, it's called Lakeview for people that are in Chicago. And that is the massage end of things. I also have my one-on-one clients that I coach from a wellness perspective. So those folks are global. They're online on Zoom. And I also am now training massage therapists in grief massage. So I'm actually taking the show on the road. So I could be in anyone's city who's listening. Yeah. And part of what I do that's very different in my massage education is I bring in the public to get what I call demonstration work. So you can be a demo body for me, and you get to see a piece of what grief massage is. And it has been so successful. People have been talking about it and saying, my mother needs to get this. My brother needs to get this. So it's been really great.
So going all the way back, we identified what grief was. It's a loss of something that you're attached to, right, throughout your life, and how if we don't move through that and past that, it will harbor. And just as the 80-year-old gentleman who was your client that you had referred to, had that problem and harbored all of that pain for his mother and had not worked through that. So now each one of you listeners, think of what could be some grief that you're harboring or some areas. No one should have to suffer. I call this suffering, right? No one should have to suffer for these years. And Marelda's going to share with us now the best way to reach out to her, the best way to connect with her, so that you can reach out to her yourself, have a conversation with her, to understand if what you're feeling is grief and how she can direct you through health of eating or stretching or even massage for you to get that to help you move past this. We must take care of ourselves and not depend on the Western medical to just supply us pills for us to feel better. It's a temporary solution that just masks what the root cause is. And that's why I love what Marelda Rodrigues does in getting to the root cause. So Marelda, how can they reach out to you? And what's the best way once they, get connected with you to communicate with you?
The best way is to go to my website, which is mareldarodrigues.com. And the second best way to learn about what I do is to go to my YouTube channel, where I will be putting out more videos. I just started it, so there's just a couple there, but it will be growing.
Great. And I know that we have your Linktree link, which will give them your YouTube link, your website link, and several other ways to connect with you and have a conversation. So we appreciate you sharing that link. And that's going to be in your podcast description notes for all of you that are listening to this. Just click on that link at your fingertips, and you'll be directed directly to her link to connect with her. And I highly recommend that each one of you do, if you're feeling any of that in your body, if you're just not sure, or doctor's not been able to figure out where your pain is coming from or what is happening. And I've been through this in my own life. And I think I just stumbled upon the cure by relieving myself from that burden of that relationship. But that was all by luck, honestly, that I was able to do that. So I know whenever I have pains in my body, I address them right away, because I don't want to live in pain. I don't want to harbor energy or anything. And so we get to live a fulfilled life of abundance the more that we address these things that are happening in our body. Marelda, is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Yes, I would like to say that grief is not to be feared. It is just to be addressed and learned.
I love that. It's not to be feared. It's just to be addressed and learned. And I'm going to share with each one of you that you're the only you that's ever been. You're the only you that will ever be. It is up to you. You do not have to live your life in fear, in pain, in grief. Take the steps necessary to do what you need to do to live the happiest life you could possibly live, pain-free and grief-free. And thank you, listeners, for being with us. And as you move on through your next week, I want to remind you to be you and be strong. So thank you, Marelda, for joining us. Thank you all for listening. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed our show today, as our guests shared their secrets on designing their life by taking the necessary leaps to expand their influence and attract the right people and clients into their lives. To start these easy steps for yourself, be sure to visit www.colleenbiggs.net/freebies to download the 7 ways to increase your exposure today.